so part of this is where, as I work with women, and part of that is to help them find clarity in what they want to do, either in a new career, or maybe they haven't worked for a while and they want to go back, and they're trying to figure it out. And there's always a lot of confusion, and we have to go through a lot of clarity work before we could really dive into what they want to do next.
Yep.
So part of that is I help them to determine what their vocation is, not necessarily what they're going to do as their career. And sometimes those two could be combined. But vocation is using your unique and brilliant gifts to make a contribution to others, your sacred work. What would you consider your vocation to be?
I think it's really communication and connection, you know, kind of facilitating that in a certain way with people. And that's, it's interesting that you're talking about this in this way. When I was getting ready to retire this spring, when I was kind of working with this longtime therapist that I work with off and on, and she had to remind me, and I think this is one of the things that's really stayed with me, like what you do, what your vocation is, using that language, you know, is really you do it everywhere. You know, it's not really tied to that job. Like if you have a job and it's meaningful to you, probably you sort of associate that with, well, that's that job and that's why it's meaningful. But really it's the human interaction that's meaningful, probably. I mean, maybe not, maybe it's creating or whatever, but whatever it is, you bring it. You know, what you feel is what you bring there, or what you engage in, or you know, help facilitate. And so that then you move to a new thing and you do the same thing there. You know, it's just that you can't picture that right now because it's not a thing yet. But if you could and it goes back to what we're saying, like if you knew what your strengths are, like if I can now say, well, you know, I'm a pretty good communicator, and I'm, in a weird way, I learned when I was young, because my family had a lot of chaos, I learned to read the room really fast, because my mom, I would think, was going to need, it was me and my mom, and then my dad and two brothers who were much older than I was. And there was a lot of problem, and it's not worth going into all that. But I learned to read the room really fast, which makes me kind of a nervous person, but it's also a tremendous skill, because I can kind of quickly ascertain if somebody's not doing okay, or what might be going on. And I mean, it's a weird skill to have, because, you know, it's like, I feel like I'm like, you know, looking at people going, what's the matter? You know, but I can sort of say, are you okay, to people? And they're like, how did you know I wasn't okay? And I just kind of want to go, well, you know, it goes back a long way, but that's all part of this thing. So really, I could go to work or volunteer at the animal shelter and have really some interesting communication and connection, because I take that there, you know? So I think we get locked into, it has to look like this because this is meaningful. But really, if we could take that down for a minute and go, well, what is meaningful about this, and move it that way, you know, I think there's some other interesting things that could happen.
Yeah, because, and I'm glad that you said that, is that it is something that you should be able to use wherever and in whatever situation. It doesn't always have just be at the workplace for it. And I think sometimes people get lost in the words or how to describe it or whatever. But if you really dive deep in, that's one of the things I do with my clients is that we go through, and they have to list out 30 things they're really good at. And sometimes they can't even come up with 5. And it's like, you make until you're like, hey, and then really and truly you end up finding what is your really your essence.
Yeah, because you can kind of see the ways all those things are pretty connected, you know? I mean, you know.
Exactly.